Oh, here we go.
All right. Well, welcome back, everyone. This is Two Beards in a Bible. Well, I get my glasses out.
Oh, I wish I had glasses.
We are in Galatians chapter 5, and so far as we can tell, we're picking up at verse 16.
Yeah. John and I just had to listen to the last episode to see where we're at. And
Right.
I said it was like deja vu. It's like we've had this conversation before. I guess I'll go ahead and read, even though everything's blurry. It says, so this is Galatians 5. Yeah, Galatians 5, verse 16. I say then, walk in the Spirit, and you shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. For the flesh lusts against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh. And these are contrary to one another, so that you do not do the things that you wish. But if you are led by the Spirit, you are not under the law. Now the works of the flesh are evident, which are adultery, fornication, uncleanliness, lewdness, idolatry, sorcery, hatred, contentions, jealousies, outbursts of wrath, selfish ambitions, dissensions, heresies, envy, murders, drunkenness, revelries, and the like, of which I tell you beforehand, just as I also told you in time past, that those who practice such things will not inherit the kingdom of God. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such there is no law. And those who are Christ's have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires. If we live in the Spirit, let us also walk in the Spirit. Let us not become conceited, provoking one another, envying one another.
Okay.
All right, John.
So as we,
You tell us what all that means.
well, as we just got done, talking about liberty in the last episode, and talking about how liberty, we kind of equate that with freedom, but it's not without some restriction. And as I think you mentioned that true freedom, there's a give and take. There has to be some law there in order to truly be free. And that's something that the founding fathers of this country found out. And they knew, anyway, that, even though they had fought for the freedom from the king, they still put in place some law and order and some rule. And that's something that God said first.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And so as you look down through there, now we get into this, and it says to walk in the Spirit, and you shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. And it goes on to tell you what the lust of the flesh is, or the works of the flesh, in verse 19. And
it also tells us what walking in the Spirit means. Mm-hmm. Because I think sometimes we see a term like that. You got to walk in the Spirit. Well, right. I think you could go to it's some supernatural experience that I'm supposed to have.
Right.
But that's not what it's saying at all.
Right. Yeah. And that's, it's interesting that so many go to that idea of some kind of a supernatural indwelling of the Spirit. That kind of, if that were the case, that would make it really easy.
Oh, it would.
It would take away. It would take away the diligence that is needed.
Yeah.
To have those fruits of the Spirit.
Yeah. When the Bible says to walk after a way, it means to order your actions after this, whatever it's going to say.
Yeah.
So walking in the Spirit is to order your actions in the way the Spirit would have you do it. And the Spirit revealed the Word of God to us, so we can know what that means.
Right. And it tells us there that they're contrary to one another, the flesh and the Spirit, and they fight against one another. There's a push and pull between the flesh and the Spirit, and that boils down what it's like to live every day as a Christian.
Yeah.
There are still those desires that perhaps will pop up. And, I think in times past you've mentioned, smoking, and how when somebody you haven't smoked in, I'm going to guess 20 years or something.
Oh yeah, it's close to it.
And, but still you had mentioned that sometimes when you smell the smoke from someone else's cigarette, it creates in you a desire, like, ooh, that would taste good, or that would be a good thing.
Where's the black coffee?
Right.
Give me that cigarette.
So, and that creates a battle.
Yeah.
That you have to say, okay, no, I'm not going to give in to that.
Yeah.
And with any of the with any of the lusts of the flesh, if you will, this is a pretty good list. It's an exhaustive list here.
Yeah. So let's just go through. It says the works of the flesh are evident, right? So that means like we all know what they are, right?
Yeah. They're noticeably different from the works of the Spirit.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So let's just go through each one and just kind of define what each of these things are. So the first one is adultery. What's adultery?
Well, that would be sexual encounters outside of
Your marriage.
outside of your marriage. Yeah.
Right. So that's what adultery is. Cheating on your spouse. Fornication. Now that's a similar thing, except you don't have to be married.
Right.
That would just be like sleeping around.
And that's one of the, not understanding the authority of the Scriptures. The Scriptures give authority for that kind of a relationship between a man and a woman who are married.
Yeah.
And outside of that, it's fornication.
Yeah, absolutely. So some of these things, I think people read these things, and maybe you're not sure what the Bible teaches about these things that it identifies as sinful things.
Yeah.
So adultery is identified as a sinful thing. Fornication is identified as a sinful thing.
And I remember being confused between the two.
Yeah.
I think everybody probably, most people probably are until they learn, until they study.
Yeah.
And so anybody listening to this, and if you're confused over adultery and fornication, well, you're in good company.
Yeah. Uncleanness. I would imagine this kind of probably goes along with the next one, which is lewdness.
Yeah.
Which would be if I had my phone with me, I could look up the two Greek words, but I would imagine that this. We think about lewdness, telling off-color jokes,
Right.
Maybe saying things that maybe we shouldn't.
Right.
I think we can all become guilty of this from time to time.
Right. Yeah, and that to be unclean. I mean, let's just think about what that would have been. Under the old law. There are certain rules about certain animals. And women when they were at that time of the month were known to be unclean, and all of those things that are listed, they serve a connotation, and I suppose we can kind of draw a similar vein to the New Testament when we talk about uncleanness in the New Testament. I think, broadly speaking, I think you can probably say it's things that are outside of the law of Christ.
Yeah, I guess that would be one way.
I mean that'd
be one way to look at it for sure.
Yeah.
Of course, lewdness. Again, that's usually the things we say, and could be some of our actions too.
Right.
Idolatry. Of course, that's something we think about being like an old time thing, but
right.
It's not.
Yeah, and I think of idolatry and adultery. The way that if we say those fast, they can be, misconstrued. Idolatry is the worship of things.
Right.
And the Lord's people did that pretty early on, didn't they?
They did. I bought this Suburban. I know you've seen it, but I have to be careful,
right,
that I don't engage in idolatry with my project truck.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that can happen.
Yeah. It's it's true with just about anything.
Yeah.
And that's my boys and I were talking today in the car about vanity, and we're talking and if you think about it, just about everything that we want to do in life is vanity.
Yeah.
I mean, just having a car.
I think King Solomon said that.
Yeah.
He?
Yeah. Right. Vanity. All is vanity.
Yeah.
Yeah. But even owning a car, to some degree, because you don't need it. I mean, it's helpful. It's very helpful in our society. But
Well, I kind of need one because I don't know how I would get to work.
well, that's the thing. That's the thing. It would be very, very difficult. But when we go to buy a car, we can, there's nothing wrong with having a car. But when we pick the color because we like it and it's pretty,
Yeah.
that doesn't mean anything.
Right.
It's not helpful in an eternal way.
I need the leather seats, John.
Right. Well, me too. But that's of course
It's
vanity.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's and the thing that we were talking about in the car, the boys and I, is that vanity, just because something is vain doesn't necessarily mean that it's wrong or forbidden. It just means you have to watch and you have to be careful with how you use that thing.
Yeah.
Because, I too am into cars and I too can fall victim to, being too worried about them.
Yeah.
And with anything that we have, it's just stuff, and we have to remember that.
Yeah. I remember when you got 2 classic cars and I only had 1. And I was like, well, I got to go buy another one now to keep up with the Joneses. Both of yours drive and neither of mine drive, so you got me.
Well, you'll catch up.
Yeah. The next one says, he says idolatry, and then he says sorcery. I think that can be easy for a Christian to avoid, I think, but I mean, that's still a thing.
Right.
I mean, there are people I know that worship the earth.
Right.
There are people involved in all sorts of weird things.
I know of people who claim to be witches.
Yeah.
I don't know how that works, but they claim it.
I hope they're Linda the Good Witch.
Right. Glenda.
Yes. Yeah. So, who was the Wicked Witch? Was that Linda? What was her name?
I don't remember. They only mentioned it once in passing. I can't remember.
Time to watch Wizard of Oz again. Hatred. Oh, man. That's a hard one.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's one of the things that I remember about my mother is that she would always say, I don't hate anybody. I just intensely dislike some people. Yes. and there's some wisdom in that.
Yeah.
In that statement, because there are, like it or not, if you're being honest, there are people that just because of perhaps the lifestyle that they're living and the things that come along with being around them, you don't like them.
Right.
And it's not, and that's not hate. You have to be, it's a fine line.
Right,
and you have to be careful that you don't cross a line to where you desire that they be harmed or you desire bad things for them. But it's okay not to like, it's okay not to like the company of somebody, for instance.
I think when we look at, as we go through these, we look at these different things. I think different people are more susceptible to different ones of these things.
Oh, certainly.
So like I think like the hate one, the sorcery one, those are things I'm like, I've never really have a problem with that. But I know some do. But like when I see the idolatry thing, and I like look deep into my soul, I'm like, yeah, you gotta watch that, Dave.
Yeah. So. And as we sit here, it's election day in the United States.
Yeah.
And you want to talk about hate.
Yeah.
You just look at the things that come about. Look at the hatred that comes about because of differing political views.
Yeah. I got a certain way I hope it goes. Mm-hmm. But I do know that God is in control either way. Yeah. So I'm not going to worry about it.
Christ is still victorious.
Yes.
And in the end, for his people, nothing's changed.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. What's the next one? Contentions. Ooh. You ever met a contentious person?
Goes hand in hand with the hatred. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it's, some people, I've met some people, I work with some people that are contentious by nature.
Yeah.
And
there are people that will just get mad. They'll complain or they'll stir up the pot wherever they're at.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's just, in fact, I've probably mentioned it before, but I was talking to an elder in church one time, and he was talking about when they built their building, how there started to be some contentions over what color the carpet was going to be, and so they just turned it over to the people that were building it and said, "Surprise us," and that's the way. So nobody chose it,
Yeah, I think that's a good way to go.
Right.
Yeah. I did a thing where I put these light bulbs in today in one of our buildings, and each light bulb can be adjusted. It's like light fixtures in a commercial building. They can be adjusted how dim they are and what color they are. And I made the mistake of asking somebody, well, what do you think of this? Oh, no, those are too bright. I don't like that color. It's like, I shouldn't have told them.
Right.
So contentions, jealousies. So,
looking across the road at your neighbor's shiny thing and being jealous over it and desiring that they don't have it and that you would, that kind of a thing.
There's like an aspect of covetousness to that.
Yeah.
Outbursts of wrath. People can get that mad.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was at the election, where you vote. I don't know what
the
they call
poll,
it, the
yeah.
poll thing. And there was some guy who was made to turn his shirt inside out.
Really? Huh.
And he wasn't very happy.
Right.
So I'm like, why would you wear that, for one thing, but whatever.
There are some people that go from 0 to angry in half a second. And it's just something that they've allowed themselves to do, and it's become part of their nature. And it's something to avoid. It's very easy to do that.
I worked with a guy, we always said he was like a light switch.
Yeah.
He went from one to the other instantly.
Yeah.
So what about selfish ambitions?
Yeah. Trying to keep everybody else under your feet while you climb some sort of a ladder or something. Or, getting into a situation where you want to be, in charge of everything.
Yep.
Over everybody else.
Dissensions.
Yeah. Well, that kind of. I might need your help on the definition for that one, but it kind of seems to me like that it would be kind of connected to what we were talking about back here, where we have it kind of goes with contentions, dissensions.
I think that's like being argumentative. I don't know. Could you look that up on your phone?
Yeah, let's do
What's
that.
dissension mean? Sometimes
we got people smarter than us screaming at the...
Yeah, you idiots. Well, we are.
Disagreement that leads to discord. So you disagree with somebody about something and you push it to the level that it causes a contention, that it causes a division.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We already talked about jealousy. How about heresies?
Well, that's a mishandling of the authority. I would say, saying, kind of maybe taking some of the authority away from the Lord, or at least thinking that you can.
Yeah, absolutely. Envy, of course, that kind of goes along with jealousy.
Right.
Murders, of course, that's different than an accidental death.
Mm-hmm.
I think the one thing about murder is there was intent.
Right.
Before it happened.
Right.
So.
And that's when you think about that, murder and killing, those are things that get confused.
Yeah.
And so you might think back, and one of the things that people might look at the Bible and say, well, so we can't murder, but look at all the people that God killed in the Old Testament, and that were killed by the hands of His people.
Yeah.
In the Old Testament, and what's the answer to that?
God's wisdom is way greater than ours.
God God doled out that punishment because
Yeah.
he has all authority. And God, from the very beginning, desired that all people would follow him. And the people that were done away with, at the hands of God's people, for instance, or even at God's doing, I'm thinking of Ananias and Sapphira, that God struck them dead. He didn't premeditate and say, "Oh, I hate them, I want to kill them." That would be murder, some kind of a premeditation and a desire to do away with somebody. But this was a direct result of not being in alignment with the Lord's law.
God made heaven, but God also made hell a place where there's a wailing and gnashing of teeth.
Right.
Which is,
And we are fortunate, I believe we're extremely fortunate to live in a dispensation of time where God has given us the entirety of the Scriptures, and He is long-suffering, and He desires that we would come to the knowledge of truth, and that we would follow Him. But at some point, make no mistake, He will administer death.
Yeah.
To those that are not faithful.
Yep. Drunkenness. Okay, well, that's drinking alcohol to the point where you're drunk.
Right.
Right.
And that can that's a sticky subject in the world today, because at what point are you drunk?
Well, I would say that's a tough thing for you to decide.
Right. And I'm thinking from my background as a in the driving school, teaching
2 drinks, right? You're drunk?
Well, one of the studies that we talked about in the driving school showed that from the very first drink, that alcohol affected your nervous system. Being a central nervous system, it acted directly on the central nervous system, and it was directly absorbed into your blood from the moment you take the drink. And so, to some degree, that alcohol affects your nervous system from the very first sip. Now, obviously, it's probably going to be about 2 drinks before it becomes outwardly noticeable.
You know what, John? We were making some kind of roast about a year or 2 ago, and it had a bottle of wine as one of the ingredients, and I had like about a tablespoon of wine, and I could immediately tell something was different.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, it's...
Yeah. Yeah. And we have medicines that contain alcohol.
Oh yeah.
And that is a different end of things. But that can certainly be abused now, can't it?
Yeah. So now going along with drunkenness, the next thing is revelries. Well, what's that?
It's the party that follows.
It's social drinking.
Right.
I mean, that's what a revelry is. If you look it up. So here's what when we talk about the use of alcohol, drunkenness is forbidden, and social drinking is forbidden.
Yeah.
So whatever else you want to say about those 2 things are forbidden.
Yeah. And as individuals, just like you said, each one of these things may affect some more than others depending on our tendencies. And so, for instance, myself, I have never been quote unquote drunk.
Yeah.
Never in my life, and it's been a conscious decision because I have a long line of people in my heritage that went way too far with alcohol.
Yep.
And I don't want to awaken that animal.
Yeah, and that's smart.
And so that's one of the things that I just don't use it like that.
So he says, and the like of which I tell you beforehand, just as I also told you in times past, that those who practice such things will not inherit the kingdom of God. So all those things we just talked about, you know what? Be really, really careful with those things. And that is the reason I don't drink.
Right.
That's the reason.
Yeah.
Because it said, those who practice such things will not inherit the kingdom of God. Now, I don't know where the line is with alcohol.
Right.
So, but I figure if I just don't even fool with it,
right,
I don't have to worry about where the line is.
Yeah. And I think something worth pointing out here is the word practice. Those who practice such things, and to practice something means that you just continually do it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, you can do, like, you could take all of these things. You could murder somebody and be forgiven of it.
Right. And how many people, name any one of these things, how many people would be excluded if you could, if you've done one of these things once, you're damned.
Yeah, that would be me.
That would be everybody.
Yeah. So the next one, he gives the opposite. He says, the fruit of the Spirit is love. Of course, I would imagine that's agape if we were to look it up. I don't know that for sure, but I bet you that it is. Joy, peace, long-suffering. What's it mean to be long-suffering?
Patient.
Yeah. As my friend, you should know this.
Right. Same here.
So long-suffering, being patient, gentleness.
Yeah.
That's an attitude that we ought to have as Christians. Self-control. Keep your cool.
Right.
One of the qualifications of an elder is they're not, they don't have a quick temper.
Right.
They're slow to anger.
Right.
That's what this means. Being in control of your emotions. He says against those things, he goes, there is no law. There's no restriction on any of those things. Love, joy, peace, long-suffering, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. There's no law against those things.
Yeah. And especially thinking of self-control. I mean, think about all of the things that we get ourselves into when we don't exercise that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dissensions? Do we get into those?
Well, yeah.
Wrath?
Yeah. Yeah, and even, talking to people, you come across people and even some friends and so on that will talk about the difficulties in their life. And when you trace back the root of the difficulty in their life, oftentimes it comes from a lack of self-control.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And that comes back and gets you later on.
Absolutely. He says, if we live in the Spirit, let us also walk in the Spirit. Right? So if we're going to claim to be Christians, right, we need to, if we're going to talk the talk, we got to walk the walk, right? I think that's what he's saying here.
Yeah. Let us, the last section there, let us not become conceited, provoking one another, envying one another. Being conceited, that's something that I think is a real concern for us as Christians, because it's very easy to show up on Sunday morning and Sunday evening and midweek Bible study and start to think of yourself as better as the others.
I always think of that. Remember on Saturday Night Live, the church lady?
Oh, yeah?
Well, isn't that special?
Right.
What was... She thought she was above, that character. She was one of those people that was above. She was conceited.
I'm thinking of Ray Stevens had a lyric in one of his, Sister Bertha, better
than you? Yes. The squirrel went berserk or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
and that's the idea here. We can't we can't be the mouthpiece of the Lord and share the gospel with others if we're looking down our nose at people
exactly
around us.
Yeah, and that's what he says. He says, don't become conceited. He says, because when you do that, you provoke one another.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Because you're all wanting what you want.
Yeah.
And that's, and of course, envying one another. So if envy is, I think we had spoken earlier, and I think we probably touched a little more on envy there, where it's seeing what somebody else has and desiring that they not have it and you do.
Yeah.
That probably is a better definition of envy.
There's a gentleman in our congregation who is never there Sunday morning because he works. But and it's easy. It would be easy to to look down your nose at that. But when you talk to this person, you find out their job is horrible. They're in a rough situation. This is a person that actually needs support and help and understanding. It's not they don't desire to do this.
Right.
And a lot of times that is the case.
Right.
We just got to be careful how we deal with that.
Yeah. And when you're dealing with, situations like that with brethren, the benefit of the doubt, is a good thing to give them until it's proven otherwise. But
yeah, so people can provoke one. And then he says envying one another. So that would bring it back to you looking at others and saying, I wish I wish I could do like so and so, or
Right.
I want to be in the position so and so's in,
Right.
or whatever that is.
Right.
So we got to be careful of those. John, I think we got to stop.
All right.
I don't know where we're at. I can't read the timer. 30 minutes, and boy, is that good.
It's a bonus episode.
Yes, it is.
All right. Well, thanks for joining in. We'll pick up in chapter 6 next time.